You try to be the ideal man, but she only surrenders to what feels dangerous. Maybe the raw truth she secretly craves is exactly what you've spent your entire life trying to tame. Today, you'll finally understand why Freud called this unconscious, craving the shadow desire, and why the monster always wins. Freud saw clearly what you felt but never dared to admit. Beneath the careful smiles, the sweet promises, the delicate ways she insists she wants love, lies a primal urge she can barely contain. She says she longs for softness, but when faced with power that growls like thunder, something inside her freezes, not in fear, but in aching desire. Because secretly, beneath layers of moral disguise, lies her attraction to the dangerous, the forbidden, the monster she claims she never wants but unconsciously hunts for. You've seen it 100 times. The good man, the gentle protector, reliable and respectful, finds himself left behind, confused, hurt, punished by invisibility. Yet the man who embodies dominance, whose presence feels charged with risk, unpredictability, who refuses to dilute himself for her comfort, is precisely who draws her in effortlessly. Freud explained this cruel paradox as the shadow, an unconscious impulse toward transgression, a hidden desire for the forbidden figure who awakens what she consciously denies, the intensity buried beneath moral masks. And here's the agony that torments you most deeply. You've done everything right, yet you still stand behind a wall of glass, watching as the woman you desire chooses a man who embodies everything you've been taught to reject. You ask yourself silently at night, why him? Why not me? Freud whispers the bitter truth from beyond, the grave. She doesn't want what is good or safe. She wants what feels alive, dangerous and uncontrollable. Because what ignites her isn't the predictable man, it's the monster who mirrors her own repressed longing for intensity. Psychology reveals this tension in harsh terms through the Madonna-whore complex. The woman you love faces a fierce, internal struggle. The respectable self she shows the world clashes violently against the part of her that longs to break rules, taste forbidden thrills, and surrender to a dominance she would publicly deny. She lives torn apart by morality and desire, hiding behind a mask of innocence, while secretly yearning to cross. Here's the truth you never wanted to hear, but always secretly suspected. The monster she's drawn to isn't the man she chooses over you. It's the part of herself she's terrified to face. Every time you see her surrender to someone whose eyes radiate danger, whose presence is unapologetically dominant, something deep within you dies. Not because you aren't enough, but because you've unknowingly become the living symbol of her own repression. The gentle, harmless man whose safety she claims to Freud called it projection, and it's far darker than you've ever imagined. What attracts her isn't cruelty, arrogance, or superficial strength. It's raw, unfiltered power, the kind that society convinced her to bury under layers of morality. She hungers for the forbidden precisely because she's imprisoned her. True desires behind a mask of innocence. The attraction you witness is her unconscious rebellion against a moral code that suffocates her, a brutal scream from a shadow that demands freedom, chaos, transgression. You thought your kindness would be enough, that your patience would win her over. But Freud whispers from beyond the grave, kindness isn't what she craves in the dark. She craves intensity. She seeks the kind of man who mirrors back the brutality of her own hidden impulses. Not violence, but the naked honesty of force, the truth she can't admit publicly, even to herself. The monster she's drawn to is the embodiment of everything she secretly desires but outwardly rejects. Every time you stand politely at the sidelines, waiting for recognition, you become invisible, erased by the darkness she hungers to unleash but refuses to claim as her own. It's cruel, but it's necessary you understand. You're not being rejected because you're gentle. You're being punished because you've become her accomplice in repression. You represent the morality she despises, the safe choice that feels more like suffocation than protection. Deep down, she resents you for mirroring the weakness she despises in herself. You became everything she said she wanted, only to discover she never wanted it at all. Freud saw clearly. The repressed always returns with monstrous force. Her desires won't vanish quietly. The more fiercely she suppresses them, the more violently they erupt. She needs a monster precisely because she's exiled her own intensity into the realm of shadows. Your pain isn't caused by rejection, it's caused by being chosen as a symbol of repression. She doesn't reject you. She rejects the weakness. She sees reflected in your eyes. What if the only way to break free from this cycle is to acknowledge the shadow within yourself? Maybe the answer isn't to chase her approval by becoming softer, safer, gentler, but to confront the truth that frightens you the most. Your own power terrifies you just as much as hers terrifies her. You too are repressing what society labeled monstrous. And as long as you deny your strength, you will remain trapped in the role of the safe, rejected man, chosen only to prove what she never truly wanted. This isn't advice. It's a warning. Keep denying your shadow, and you'll remain a victim of hers. Every woman's unspoken desire will continue to torment you until you finally see that what she craves is a reflection of the intensity you buried alive long ago. The monster she desires is also within you, waiting to awaken. Subscribe to the channel. If you're ready to stop being erased, she wears virtue like armor. Controlled, educated, emotionally correct. The kind of woman who speaks softly about healthy love, posts quotes about peace, and claims to seek a man who listens, respects, supports. But there's a silence behind her eyes, a restraint too rehearsed. And if you look closely, you'll see it. Her morality is a performance, not a reflection of peace, but a symptom of repression. Freud would call this a neurotic compromise. The more a woman denies her instinctive desire for intensity, the more she builds a fortress of ethics around herself. A clean image, polished words, respectable standards, all carefully constructed to silence the shadow. But the truth leaks through the cracks. Her body still remembers what her ego tries to kill. The thrill of power, the chaos of surrender, the brutal beauty of wanting what she's not supposed to want. This isn't about good or evil. It's about fear, not of men, but of herself. Because if she lets the shadow speak, if she allows the forbidden desire to rise to the surface, everything collapses. Her reputation, her safety, her sense of control. So she overcompensates. She praises the soft man. She rejects the dominant one. But late at night, her fantasies betray her. She dreams of the one she publicly condemns, the one who doesn't ask for permission, the one who doesn't flinch when she tests his strength. What she fears is not the man. It's her own reaction to him. And if you're the man who tries to play by the moral rules, who bends, softens, adapts, you become part of the lie. You help her maintain the illusion that she is pure, above desire, immune to darkness. You become her safety net, her excuse, her emotional pet. But you will never be her obsession, because obsession doesn't bloom in sanitized light. It grows in the hidden corners where shame and desire collide. The tragic irony? The woman who proclaims purity the loudest is often the one with the deepest hunger for transgression. Her persona is not a reflection of who she is. It's a desperate attempt to silence what she cannot control. The saint she presents to. The world exists only to hide the shadow that claws from within, and if you don't see this, you'll keep punishing yourself, thinking you weren't good enough. But the problem was never goodness. The problem was the cage. You entered her world like a gentleman, and she locked you there. feeding off your validation while secretly longing for the man she cannot tame. Not because he's cruel, but because he doesn't collapse in the face of her masks. Now ask yourself, how many times have you confused her moral performance for emotional truth? How many times have you accepted her decency over her desire? There's something she wants, desperately, but she cannot name it without shame. And the more she denies it, the stronger it becomes. That's the nature of repression. Freud didn't just theorize it, he exposed it with surgical brutality. What is repressed always returns, but it never returns clean. It comes back twisted, inflamed, eroticized beyond control. You think her attraction to the wrong type is just a phase, a poor choice, a mistake she'll outgrow. But you're wrong. That pull she feels toward the man who doesn't censor his presence, that's not confusion. That's the echo of everything she's tried to erase inside herself. Her desires are not confused, they're forbidden. And that difference is what makes them so violently intoxicating. The more a woman calls a desire wrong, the more power it gains in the dark. Freud knew this well. He saw it in the eyes of patients who sat perfectly composed on the surface, but whose unconscious minds were screaming. What's erotic isn't always what's beautiful. Sometimes it's what's terrifying. What she fears, feeling. What she's not allowed to fantasize about. The man she's told herself she'd never touch is the one who haunts her the most. This is the erotic shadow. The part of the psyche that doesn't play by the rules, that doesn't care about values, upbringing, or social roles. It doesn't ask for consent from the ego. It moves through dreams, slips into thoughts, and hijacks attraction. It doesn't want the man who waits. It wants the one who takes, not violently, but with presence so complete it dissolves her defenses. You've seen this play out, haven't you? She preaches boundaries, lists requirements, talks about emotional safety. But then she disappears for a weekend with someone who breaks every one of her rules. She comes back distant. Something in her has shifted. And you, who respected every line she drew, feel like a ghost. The truth? You were a placeholder, a symbol of what she thought she wanted, until her shadow came knocking. This doesn't mean you should become the man who manipulates or controls. That's not what this is about. The shadow doesn't respond to cruelty. It responds to truth. The truth of a man who isn't afraid to embody his depth, his hunger, his silence, his mystery. The man who doesn't dilute himself to be chosen. That is what awakens the part of her that she buries. Because every time she represses a desire, it doesn't die. It waits. And when it returns, it wears a mask of obsession. It possesses her thoughts. It makes her feel alive and terrified all at once. That's the paradox she lives in, fearing what she craves and craving what she fears. And you, if you continue to operate only on the surface, you will always be her emotional decoy. She will keep you close enough to feel safe, but far from the place where her desire truly lives. Freud wasn't describing pathology. He was describing you, her, all of us. The human soul split between order and instinct. And when instinct gets buried too long, it explodes through the cracks. So ask yourself, with brutal honesty, how many of her no's were actually not yet? How much of her rejection was just self-protection dressed in ethics? And how long will you keep pretending you don't see the fire behind her rules? You keep telling yourself that if you work harder, become more stable, more successful, more emotionally available, she'll finally choose you. You build yourself into the man who provides, supports, protects, and still, she drifts toward him. The one who's reckless, bold, unapologetically present. The one who doesn't ask what she wants because something in him already knows. And you sit there, defeated, thinking this must be personal. But it's not. It's biological, scientific, measured in data you didn't even know existed. A joint study by researchers from UCLA and William and Mary uncovered something that should have shattered every illusion you've built around attraction. Women, when considering long-term partners, show a strong preference for prestige, men who are respected, capable, stable. But in short-term, high-arousal contexts, the preference flips. Dominance takes the lead, not dominance as aggression, but as raw presence, command, non-negotiable confidence, the kind of energy that doesn't ask to be chosen, it simply is. This is where most men get psychologically destroyed. They become the man who fits the long-term checkbox, but never the short-term flame. They get the compliments, the emotional labor, the "you're such a great guy," but not the hunger, not the desire, not the eyes that say, "I want you right now." Because women have learned to publicly validate one type of man while secretly desiring another. This isn't manipulation, it's survival. The part of the psyche wired to seek security praises prestige. But the body, the instinct, the erotic shadow, it remembers something older, something animal, the man who could take the world if he wanted to. And that's the man she craves when no one's watching, when she's not performing, when she's not trying to be the good woman who chooses what's safe. Science doesn't care about your feelings. These studies didn't emerge from red pill forums or emotional theories. They're clinical, peer-reviewed, and consistent across cultures. The split is real. The man she says she wants is not always the man who ignites her body. And if you ignore this, you'll keep trying to logic your way into a territory ruled by instinct. Think about your own life. How many times have you seen her choose the man with fewer achievements, less status, no emotional intelligence, yet she glows around him? She reacts to his energy, not his resume. Because dominance isn't about controlling others. It's about being uncontrollable. That's what her nervous system responds to. Not just what you say, but who you are when you say nothing. Your silence, your stillness, your unwillingness to shrink, and if that makes you angry, good. Let it burn through the lies you've told yourself. Let it destroy the illusion that being chosen is about being good. You weren't overlooked because you weren't enough. You were overlooked because you were too calculated, too composed, too clean. She saw no chaos in you, and without chaos, there's no desire, only comfort. And comfort doesn't arouse, it pacifies. So stop trying to be the man she should want, and become the man her shadow already wants. But she's afraid to name. The one who holds both prestige and danger in the same breath. The one who doesn't flinch when she tests your edges, not because you're trying to dominate her, but because you refuse to disappear. The most terrifying monster isn't out there. It's the one she keeps locked inside. The one she doesn't name, doesn't face, doesn't allow to breathe. And every time she chooses a man who burns through her boundaries, it's not because he's stronger, it's because her own darkness is starving. Jung called it the shadow, everything we refuse to admit we are, yet everything we become when we look away too long. She speaks like light, kindness, boundaries, respect, calm. She swears she wants soft hands, clear words, emotional safety, and maybe she does, but underneath her perfect phrases, there's a pressure building. The more she tries to be good, the more violently she begins to crave the exact opposite. Not because she's broken, but because she's human. And humans don't get to choose what they desire, they only get to choose what they deny. Jung warned, "What you resist persists. What you fight, you strengthen." And the more she resists her own capacity for chaos, intensity, and surrender, the more power that monster gains in silence. He grows in the margins of her moral life. He becomes myth, fantasy, obsession, and eventually, fate. Because what she calls attraction isn't about the man. It's about the part of herself that has been exiled for too long. And when you bury something alive, it doesn't die. It waits. Here's the cruel irony. You try to be her light, her safety, her protector. But she doesn't need more light. She's drowning in it. What she needs is someone who doesn't flinch when the shadow shows up. Someone who can see her darkness without moralizing it. Someone who doesn't shrink when the energy shifts. You become invisible not because you lack value, but because you refuse to face the storm she's trying to control inside herself. The man she craves isn't a villain. He's a mirror, and the reflection terrifies her. Jung didn't preach wholeness as comfort. He saw it as confrontation. A brutal union between the self and the shadow, between who we pretend to be and what we really are when no one's watching. And until she makes peace with her own monstrosity, she'll keep chasing it in others, in men who don't soften their edges, in men who say no when she tests their limits, in men who don't ask to be allowed, they just arrive, fully, formed, and take up space without guilt. And here's what no one tells you. If you've never met your own shadow, you'll mistake hers for danger. You'll keep stepping aside, dimming yourself, trying to make her feel safe. But all you're doing is confirming her fear that power must always come from the outside, that she'll never be allowed to own it. So she keeps looking for someone to carry it for her. But you, if you want to stop being erased, must become the man who's made peace with his own abyss, the one who's not afraid of silence, the one who can stand still while she trembles with truths she doesn't want to feel. You don't need to control her. You need to stop abandoning yourself in the presence of her fear. The monster she sees in you is the one she refuses to see in herself, and until that changes, neither of you will ever be free. You are not weak. You are buried beneath years of obedience, diluted instincts, and performances designed to make you tolerable. You were not born soft. You were trained to be silent. And now, when she looks at you, she sees a man who has betrayed his fire. Imagine this: a volcano, dormant beneath the ground. From the surface, everything appears stable, quiet, controlled. But beneath that calm, magma boils. The heat builds. The pressure mounts. And eventually, it doesn't ask for permission. It erupts. That's what your masculinity has become. Not aggression, not rage, but repressed force that's been begging to move. And every time you play the good man, the manageable man, the emotionally neutered man, you bury the volcano a little deeper, until she no longer feels your presence at all. She doesn't want noise. She wants depth. She wants to feel the ground shift when you walk into a room, not because you dominate, but because you exist without apology. That kind of man doesn't have to prove anything. He doesn't chase. He doesn't explain. He doesn't shrink when she tests him. He knows what he is, and that knowing radiates through everything he does. But you, if you're honest, have been taught to fear your own center, to fear being too much, to be digestible, to be soft enough not to intimidate, open enough to be liked, sensitive enough to feel, but never dangerous enough to awaken anything primal in her. You became a filtered version of yourself, and she can sense it because deep inside her lives a serpent, coiled, quiet, not evil, but ancient. That serpent is her instinct, her erotic shadow, her capacity to surrender, not out of weakness, but as a form of power. And she only uncoils when she feels something worthy of her risk, something unshakable. She's not looking for a prince. She's not looking for a therapist. She's waiting for the signal that says, "You can burn here, he won't collapse." Most men have never seen that side of a woman. Not because it doesn't exist, but because they never gave her a reason to let it live. They begged for love. They negotiated desire. They spoke to her mind and ignored her storm. But storms don't respond to logic. They respond to presence. So here's your mirror. You say you want to be seen. But do you dare to be undeniable? You say you want her desire. But do you carry enough depth to awaken her serpent? You say you're tired of being erased. But what have? You embodied that's impossible to ignore. Stop looking for techniques. You're not a script. You're not a tactic. You're a buried God waiting to remember that silence is only holy when it's chosen, not when it's forced. She'll keep looking for the monster, not because she wants pain, but because pain, at least, feels real. And until you stop being afraid of becoming the storm, she'll keep dreaming of the man who is. Carl Jung didn't speak in metaphors. He spoke in wounds. He said clearly, what you deny in yourself doesn't disappear. It mutates, grows teeth, and takes control from the shadows. That's the fate of the man who refuses to see the monster, not just in her, but in himself. The one who keeps trying to be safe, moral, lovable, while the fire inside rots from starvation. You think you're being good, but what you're really being is hollow, a shell of potential. And women feel it. They don't say it. They don't even know how to name it. But they feel when a man has abandoned his center. They sense the absence, and they walk away, because something inside them still wants to burn. Nietzsche would have spit on your strategy of emotional submission. He called it what it is, the morality of slaves, a doctrine that teaches men to be tame, agreeable, inoffensive, at the cost of their own spirit. And what you call being a better man may be nothing more than your slow suicide. You weren't born to be liked. You were born to carry your chaos like a crown. She doesn't want a puppet. She doesn't want a puppet master either. She wants a presence she can surrender to without losing herself. A man who doesn't seek control, but carries so much internal order that her own storm finally feels safe to unravel. And that kind of man doesn't emerge from books or strategies. He's carved by confrontation. He's built in silence. He's forged in the moment. He stops begging to be chosen and starts choosing himself. Because here's the final truth, and it's not poetic. The woman who never admits the monster becomes his prisoner. The man who never owns the monster becomes invisible, and both remain trapped in roles that extinguish their fire. The monster isn't evil. The monster is necessary. He is your edge, your pulse, your line in the sand. Without him, you become digestible. Without him, she becomes numb. Together, you become silent ghosts in a play called adulthood. Smiling, functional, empty. But when you stop fearing the shadow, it becomes form. When you stop apologizing for your depth, it becomes gravity. And when she finally meets a man who isn't scared of what she's never said out loud, that's when she drops the mask. That's when the serpent under the dress awakens, and it will either be the death of her lies or the end of your illusion. Leave a comment if this cracked something open, and subscribe to the channel if you're done being erased, because what you felt here, you won't find anywhere else.